She-Ra and the Princess of Power is the remake of the 1985 She-Ra series. Normally when you do a remake, it doesn't live up to the original, but She-Ra does that in spades. In fact, I would go so far to say that She-Ra and the Princess of Power is one of the great American cartoons of our day.
Hi, we're the Final Bosses, and today we're going to be looking at the underrated series She-Ra and the Princess of Power. Well, with that out of the way, let's fight. She-Ra spans 52 episodes through 5 seasons. With most TV shows having 22 episodes in a season, She-Ra is very short for a TV show. However, that becomes one of its strengths. Like Avatar before it, She-Ra does better with less, and doesn't overstay its welcome, while leaving the fans wanting more. It tells a tight-knit story with very little in the way of filler. And while there is filler, the writers always manage to bring those elements back into the larger story. The pacing is one of the show's biggest weaknesses. Sometimes it goes too fast, like in Season 3, and sometimes it goes too slow, like I'd say the beginning of Season 4. Even with that weakness, though, it never becomes dull or overbearing. The music in the show, I would say, it would be another weakness. While it's really well written and fits perfectly with the scenes they use it in, very little tracks stand out. The opening and transformation theme being the only real standouts. And yes, I just said the music being good was a weakness. I mean, when you think about your favorite shows, movies, games, most have fantastic soundtracks. And She-Ra is so close, but doesn't quite hit that fantastic mark. And there's it. I just covered the weaknesses of the show. Some slight pacing issues, and just good music. Everything else about the show is knocking you out of the park good.
She-Ra, like any good media, has fantastic characters, none of which are two-dimensional. Even the side characters, which seem to be one-note characters, they show great depth. Every character feels like they could be a real person. They have silly, serious sides, and they have strengths and weaknesses. And they have the real reactions to events around them. Honestly, it's a breath of fresh air to have such reliable characters. Our 4 main characters are Catra, Adora, Glimmer, and Beau. They are modern classics and deserve much praise. While I plan to go into greater depth in the future, here are light overviews of each of those characters. Adora is a natural leader. She is bold and brave and loyal to her friends. Most importantly, she cares deeply for those in her life and can quickly forgive when needed. However, her character is not a good actor. It's actually one of her exploitable weaknesses. When overwhelmed or acting, she stumbles on her words. She also has a fun side with a light teasing and silly faces. Catra is quite literally a cat. She wants affection and love, but is not great at showing it or communicating it. Catra likes to play with her friends and enemies alike, teasing and poking fun. She is easily frightened and easily annoyed. She is a massively flawed character that reacts to the world around her. And while she has the drive and intelligence to reach her goals, her insecurities and flaws often get in the way of her true happiness.
Glimmer is an ever-changing character. Talking about Glimmer without spoilers is going to be difficult, but here we go. Glimmer is like Adora in the fact that she's both brave and a good leader. While she can let her own ego get in the way of better ideas, she is normally willing to listen to advice. She's very loving to her friends in her life and very aggressive to her enemies. This pent-up aggression can sometimes be aimed at her friends, but for the most part, Glimmer is the smile and the joy of the group. Beau is the glue that binds people together. Beau is a peacemaker in the friend group, though even he has his breaking point. He makes sure everyone is happy, even at the cost of his own happiness. While he loves the truth, he will lie if he thinks people will be happier with that lie. He's probably the silliest member, but he is also the most grounded. He can see good in others where most can't, and he doesn't usually let his ego get in his way. However, in his strength, he doesn't let people walk all over him. When hurt, however, it can take him more time than others to heal. These are just the 4 main characters. Every character in the show has this depth, even if it doesn't look like it on the surface. The writers use these characters for perfection, and they play off one another just like real people would.
As I mentioned earlier, the story is well done and tight-knit. It starts like a typical fantasy story, but moves into some crazy plot points later on. While many outcomes are predictable, the show still does a great job at keeping you guessing. It builds its lore at a good pace, where you're always learning something about the world. And outside the first episode, you're not getting any big expedition dumps. It comes naturally and never feels like too much.
As for emotion, the show will give you that. There are a few deaths that will make you sob. There are heartwarming moments that will make you sob. There are such hype moments that it will make you sob. Really, with great characters and a great story, it's not hard to pull on the heartstrings and make a person cry or shout for joy. And She-Ra brings that in spades, especially in the final season. The best part of all this is She-Ra is an action show. Even in the low-budget Season 1, the action is always smooth, well-animated, and feels like real magical people fighting each other, as much as that can feel real. It flows well and can be just as hype as Avatar or My Hero. Each character has their own fighting style, and those grow as the seasons go on. These fighting styles also clash nicely against one another. Overall, for a show with such deep characters and great moments of drama, the action is great and keeps the show flowing.
So this last part of the video, we wanted it to be more personal, so that's why we wanted to sit down and talk with you guys. Unfortunately, the first recording we made got a little messed up, so we're re-recording it. It always happens, technical issues, right?
Yeah.
But we wanted this one to be personal because this is something that's truly important to a lot of people, and it's important to us too. And it's something that we think the series excels at, and that we really wanted to talk about just face-to-face with you guys. And that's the LGBTQ representation in She-Ra Princesses of Power, and how they do representation flawlessly. In terms of like any show to date, I can't think of a show to date that has done LGBTQ representation as well as She-Ra and the Princess of Power.
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember watching Korra back when that first came out, and at the very end, it just seemed like they shoehorned in her being bi, and I felt that was really disingenuous and very demeaning to the LGBT.
Like it felt like they were using it as a selling point,
Yeah.
and not a normalization of it.
Because they didn't. There was no build up or anything. It was just like, oh, look at us, look how amazing we are. We're going to use this to, promote our image, and it wasn't, we're going to use this to promote the image of the LGBT community.
And I actually feel the same way about Korra. And a lot of shows tend to put it in America as a selling point. It's become like a industrial thing where they just do it for like basically monetary reasons.
Yeah, I'm a huge ally of the LGBT community, and I love when its representation is done right, because I get to see my friends who are part of that community get so excited and so happy to see proper representation instead of this is just a blank piece of paper that just says a gay on it and that's all the character is, versus an actual well-written, developed character who happens to be gay, bi, or whatever.
For example, I am a member of the LGBTQ community. As Joe said, I'm bisexual. But the way it's done in She-Ra is it comes across so normal. Like, for example, this is the example I always use for my friends when I'm talking about the show. When you find out that Beau has two dads, your immediate first thought is not, wow, Beau has two dads, they're gay. It's, wow, Beau's two dads are so amazing. That's why Beau is such a great person, because he has two amazing fathers who raised him right.
And you can see a little bit of Beau in each of his dads.
Like the combative, serious, tactical one to the funny, more friendly, loving one.
And it shows why Beau is such just a complete character and one of the best animated characters I've ever seen.
And that's something that a lot of shows can't do, even with regular parents. Like, the parents come across as like they're stupid or they don't understand the kids in a lot of shows. Mm-hmm. But with She-Ra, with Beau's parents especially, you can clearly see where they come in. And then there's also, of course, like other couples, but we don't want to go into spoiler territory, obviously. But one that's pretty obvious that's been around since season 1 would be like Natasha and Spinnerella, who, when you find out they're together, you're like, oh, well, that just makes sense.
Yeah.
They're always together, and they're cute, and they're zany, and their chemistry plays off each other. So it becomes a they are not gay characters, is in they are just characters that are a part of the LGBTQ community, like many of us are, and they feel like genuinely like us. And as someone who is outside the community and you see it, you don't see it as strange. It makes it more normal. You're like, oh, that just makes sense with their character.
Right. Like, I love when things are presented in a realistic, natural way, even in a cartoon show that's filled with magical princesses. I still like to see that realistic of, hey, these characters have these feelings, these sexual feelings towards people of their gender, of a different gender, and it's not this unnatural thing or this, ooh, look at this, look at this, look at this. It's just, hey, that's part of life.
That clicks, yeah. That's how it should be. And that's how representation should be. Is if we want it to be more normalized, that way kids can see it and accept it, then that's the way it should be done. It shouldn't be put on like a spectacle pedestal. It should be something in your show that's woven into the world, that's just normal, like it is in our world today.
Yeah.
And that's what She-Ra does tenfold better than any show I've ever seen.
And to continue off of that, they use that same kind of concept in the body types of the characters.
That's another really good point. She-Ra as a series has varying body types for all of its characters, and they make sense. Like, for example, Glimmer being a bit more on the less of the fit side, whereas Beau is super fit because he's always in combat. Glimmer uses magic. She's a mage. She doesn't have to constantly...
Yeah, I mean, she doesn't even really have to walk. She just teleports.
And you're like, her body makes sense, and it's nice to see that varying body type.
Yeah, and then, but one of the great things about the show is as the characters develop and become, different people, and I don't want to get into spoiler territories on Glimmer, but as she becomes more of a leader in her role... She keeps her figure, but she slims down a little bit because she's doing a lot
the
more
body
movement.
types progress with the characters. Another really, really good example in She-Ra of body type would be example of Mermista, who doesn't really travel or do all that much action, but as the show goes on, even her body type changes quite a bit from what she originally was in the series. That and the ability to get the most out of your characters is good writing. A lot of people, including us, would use Avatar as the Last Airbender as an example of how to get the most out of a character.
Yeah.
I feel the same way that She-Ra excels in that, both body type, personality, LGBTQ representation, and just in the writing of the characters in general, just being able to pull everything that character is and putting it on display for your audience, that's a sign of good writing. In all honesty, that's just it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And, I can't, again, we both brag on this show a lot. A couple of things that I did want to talk about that is sort of a bit of a problem is the amount of gate guarding in this community from older people, in particular. Not us, obviously. We love cartoons, and we're definitely not afraid to watch remakes or try remakes, obviously. Right. And me and you never watched the original series either.
No, yeah, I'm a bit older, but that was still just before my time.
That was about 10 years before I was born.
Right.
So I definitely was not around when the original She-Ra aired. But I have seen a lot of the people who talk about it as propaganda, but that's completely untrue. That's fabricated.
I think we just went over how it's more natural and it's less like, hey, look at this. It's like, hey, this is life.
If anything, She-Ra and the Princess of Power is a love letter to the original series.
Oh yeah,
there are plenty of references to the original series. For example, some besides keeping all the characters' names original and just redesigning them and making them modern, because the 1985 series was made to sell toys.
Right. Yeah.
Every character looked exactly the same with that 1985 doll structure.
That was pretty much everything for the 80s, 90s, and even kind of today still, but not as much anymore. But yeah, 80s was all about making your characters to sell toys instead of making characters.
So, all they did was take those older characters, revamp them, and give them actual personality. There's even plenty of references. If someone who claims to be a fan of the 1985 series would actually watch the original She-Ra, they would probably note that, for example, the Shadow Hall where Hordak's sanctum is, that was actually Shadow Weaver's house in the 1985 series. Milog, we had this conversation today, the cat that Catra gets, is a reference to her original transformation from the original series. There are plenty of other references throughout the series. A small one being, for example, when they go undercover, Scorpia's name that she has, Linda Doreen, is actually her name of the original character in both the 1985 series and the 1990s comic series, which is Scorpia's actual name.
Yeah.
There are plenty of references. It's just, most people won't watch it because they just want to have something to complain about.
Yeah.
Most of the people who say they hate the series probably have not seen it.
I mean, that's part of the reasons we wanted to make this video, because we feel like it's really underrated, and those who probably would really enjoy the series may be turned off by some of the stuff that's out there that's not necessarily true, especially when it comes to the great representation and the references to the original 1985 series.
That's a big thing, is that the show is in no way propaganda or preachy. The show flows brilliant. The last thing we kind of want to go over is the rating system for the show. I'll let you start it off since you gave your rating in the actual script.
So I'm a bit of a side writer myself. I like writing a lot of different side stories. So I would say between the two of us, I'm a little more strict when it comes to a rating. But for me, She-Ra is a high 8.5. And that's pretty good for me when it comes to TV shows.
So I'm a bit more, though I'm not as much of a writer, I have experienced a lot more series than Joe. I would say I've watched a lot more both anime and cartoons.
I would agree.
So I have a very broad list, but the thing about me is that my top 3 favorite cartoons haven't changed since the release of Gravity Falls. And She-Ra modified my top 3 favorite cartoons. I rated She-Ra a 9, which the only show above it at that point was Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is a 10 in my book.
Yeah, it's my only 10 I've got.
And I rated She-Ra a 9, which is, I gave Gravity Falls an 8.5, so that puts She-Ra as my second favorite cartoon of all time.
Oh, wow.
I personally think the show is well written and brilliantly executed. And I love action cartoons. I'm a sucker for well-written action cartoons. Now, we are in the golden age of American animation. That's something that, like, me and you have realized. We've had this conversation many times. Right now is the best time cartoons have ever been.
Mm-hmm.
As a Westerner American cartoon watcher, this is the best time to be watching cartoons.
Yeah.
You've got the Owl House, Kupo, stuff that are dropping that are just so good. Weekly almost. And during COVID, animation's become a lot more prevalent.
Right.
So it just feels like right now is a great time to watch cartoons.
Oh, yeah. But that's the whole reason we wanted to make this video, guys, is so if you haven't checked out this TV show, it's on Netflix. All 5 seasons are there. So just go ahead and give it a swing. We really, really love the show, and we think it's extremely underrated.
And if you guys want any more deep theories or lore or maybe characters, or even for us to talk about our favorite couples, because we've had this conversation a lot in She-Ra too. And if you want to see any more She-Ra content, just let us know in the comments. We will gladly talk about this show. I mean, it's one that we will go back and rewatch.
Oh, for sure. And just leave a like, and you guys are always awesome. And as always, we have been
the Final Bosses.